This video is to support the SQL template to allow you to produce SPC charts using SQL, and today I'm with Madupi Onganlaja, the author of the script.
Hi there.
So we're not going to talk about the merits of statistical process control in this video, but if you do want to know about that, we've got a great resource, Making Data Count, and there's the webpage. And Madupi, it's a very popular resource. How many hits do we have up to date on this website?
We've got over 30,008 currently on the website.
Over 30,000 hits. So if you go to the website, there'll be resources, interactive PDF guides, videos you can watch which will tell you about the merits of using statistical process control. But also this is where you can actually download the SQL template which you can then run locally, and it's in the resources page. And there is also the exact web address to pick up the SQL template. Now, I said we weren't going to talk about statistical process control, but we're just going to give you one example. This is one of our favorite examples. So a classic RAG table with a 2-point comparison arrow. Now, Madupi, if you were placed with this table in a meeting room, where is it likely that your attention's going to fall?
My attention will be focused on the red sections.
Yeah, the red sections. That's often culturally where we tend to concentrate. And I've got one example of how you can get different messages from the red sections. So here's the same chart, general surgery, drawn out a statistical process control chart. And in this example, you can see despite it being red, actually we've had some fundamental improvement going on, and we're actually getting really close to the target. So you can imagine the conversations that we might be had with this specialty is actually carry on doing what you're doing. You're showing strong improvement. You might get over the target. But here's another specialty, rheumatology, with exactly the same red outlook and the downward arrow, but when we look at it through statistical process control, a completely different message. And in fact, this specialty is under a lot of pressure, under a lot of decline, and you'd want a different interaction with this specialty. So statistical process control gives you a more meaningful outlook on what is happening with your data. Right, back to the SQL template script. So the purpose of this script is to provide you with an initial solution to create the attributes of an XMR chart in a table within your data warehouse or server to allow you to visualize statistical process control charts. So you will have your data source or input, which could be your data warehouse or your data server. Then this script is going to sit next, which will manipulate those tables and provide you with the SPC calculations. And then you've got your output, which will be your visualization tool. And what sort of visualization tools, Madupi, could this script potentially work with?
You can use Tableau, SSRS, Power BI, or any other product available out there.
So we've tried to make this script to be visualization tool agnostic. So whichever software tool you've got, it's just about plotting the metadata that the SQL script creates. Now, you don't have to use SQL. I'd just like to point out we do have some alternative tools. And if you go to our website, there's also an Excel template which will allow you to plot individual indicators and create SPC charts that way. And for those of you that use Alteryx, we also have an Alteryx macro, and do get us in touch with us via email if you want any information about that. So those of you that know a bit about statistical process control will know that there are quite a few charts, quite a wide range of charts. This script will just create the XMR chart. And why have we decided to do that? Well, because it's the simplest and most versatile of control charts that should handle a large variety of data in healthcare that you might be using. So it's not to say that you shouldn't graduate onto some of the more specialist charts, but this is a great place to start. Really briefly, you will need to know the anatomy of an SPC chart because that will help you with the data that comes out of the script. So it really is just a time series graph with 3 reference lines. So there's a mean line in the middle, and there are some process limits on the outside. And those process limits are created on the data itself. So you would expect around 99% of the data to fall within those limits. And because we know that those limits are set on the data itself, you do need a robust amount of data to create reliable process limits. There's lots of different opinions in the industry. but we tend to fall with about 15 to 20 points will create your reliable limits. You can go lower than that, but you just need to be aware of the risk that might have with the control limits not representing the variation of your data. The script will outline where statistical process rules are broken, which are special cause, and those are times where you want to go and investigate. And these are the main rules that the script will outline. So a single point outside the process limits, got a run of points above or below the mean line, a run of points in consecutive ascending or descending order, or 2 out of 3 points close to the process limits, and it will flag if any or all of these rules are broken at any particular time. Because there's no hierarchy with these rules. If there's any special cause variation, you would want to go and investigate it, because it's not something that's likely to happen through random chance or the natural variation of the system. There is something behind that, either something that's improving the system which you might want to support, or some extra concern or pressure in the system which you'd want to understand and perhaps try to alleviate. So when you download the SQL template, you will be able to run it straight off, because what we've done is we've put inside the template some sample or dummy data, so you can run it straight off and you can view the output and perhaps link it to your visualization tool so you can get a feel of what should happen when you run the template. Once you're happy with how the template works, you will want to remove the sample data and use your own data from your servers or your data warehouse. And to do that, you need to locate section 1, which is the data input section. And there will be 2 base tables in that section. One will be a data table, and this will cover the following attributes: a date field, an area code or an area name. Now, or this could even be trusts, this could be regions, this could be specialties, this could be ward, any area division that you're interested in. And the second thing is a measure code and name, and this will relate to the key performance indicator or the metric or measure you're interested in. This example, we've got a KPI referring to weeks weighted. And then value will be the data, the measurement, the recording for that particular date in that area for that particular measure. So for this, on the 2019 in August, we had for the North Outpatient team 12 weeks weighted for KPI 1. The second table you will need is a lookup or metadata table, which will add extra details to your statistical process control graph. You'll need a link back to the original table, and then there's 2 extra fields. One is a target to allow you to put targets against your statistical process control graphs, and finally there is a high improvement column. Now this is to help you identify which is a positive direction of travel for improvement, and if a positive direction of travel is higher numbers, you want this value set at 1. If you want a positive direction of travel to be lower numbers, you want to set it at 0. So for this example, for weeks weighted in the North Outpatient team, we've set this flag or binary code at 0, because what we want is lower numbers, lower waiting times for patients. But if it was another metric, perhaps mandatory training, we might want to set that flag at 1, because we'd want as many of our staff to complete the mandatory training as possible. Now, if you do all that with that metadata table and the SPC table, you will be able to create outputs like this, an SPC dashboard, where you can highlight improvements visually, you can highlight concerns, and you can place that against the target line. So to modify your script, you need to identify those insert values which we've provided and replace them to a link to your local activity table or tables, but very importantly, keeping the column structure, because it's that column structure that will be used in the script to create your output table. And also to remember to create your own version of that metadata table, which for each indicator gives you the target and which direction improvement should be. So when you run the script, you will get an output table presented. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run you through some of the key columns so you can apply that or join it into your visualization tool. So you've got the area name or measure code, and you'll probably want that as a filter because there'll be one SPC chart specific for each area name measure code combination. You want the sample date for your x-axis. You want to be using the value column to plot your data. Now there are also columns to cover the mean and upper control limits and lower control limits to turn your time series graph into an SPC chart. And then at the bottom there are also all the rules that we're considering. And there's a flag, one indicating that for that particular point in time there's special cause variation, the rule's been breached, or 0 to indicate common cause variation. And the final column I'd like to highlight to you is we have a variation type column. Now, you might want to use this column to highlight your special cause on your visualization so that your decision makers using this chart can instantly appreciate whether particular time points are showing improvement, concern, or common cause variation. They don't have to count the dots or look at the rules. And there's would be an example just to overlay the color from the variation type onto your chart. Just going to go really briefly into adapting the script. There's obviously lots of adaptations that you're welcome to make, but we're just going to follow through some of the more common ones you would want to do, and that's to do with changing some of the rules. So for example, for our count of points above or below the mean line, we've set it to 7. You might want to set it to a different value. And if you do, what you need to do is you need to identify the lines of commentary that have the comment change for local requirement. And when you highlight those areas of commentary, you just want to make a simple change of that constant from 7 to 8 or 9, depending on where you want the rule to activate. Now there's just one complicated exception to that, is that at the bottom there you will see that actually you want to use the value of the constant you want -1 because it's counting the set. And you'll need to do the same for all of the change for local requirements comment, because there'll be a set for above the mean line and a set for below the mean line too. Please make sure when you make these changes that you test what's happening. So we're going to take a pause there, and we're just going to see how this script goes down, see how well it's used, see if there's any enhancements that could be made over time. Because what the next thing we might be introducing to you is you might come across our statistical process control icons, is we will be expanding this script to allow you to place icons rather than charts, just so as an alternative to that RAG summary display, you could have a concise display of a whole number of metrics and perhaps areas where you can identify using statistical process control where change is happening and what the capability of hitting the target is. Just going to run you through a few things to be aware of running this script. Is just a reminder that don't run the script blindly. When you introduce your own data, you must assure yourself that the statistical process control chart is correct and is being interpreted correctly. And if you want better understanding over interpretation of statistical process control, again, following the Mating Data Count website. Secondly, I just want to remind you that the XMR chart will run based on all the data provided. So if you have a new month's data that you add to the script, the process limits and mean line will adjust to include that new data. And the third thing to mention is that feel free to adapt the script for your own purposes, but just make sure you test any changes. And if you come up with an improvement or a more efficient way of doing what we've shown you today, please do get in touch. But the only thing we must say is do make sure that it's system agnostic as far as possible, because when we share these scripts around, we want minimal intervention when you apply it to your local data. We don't want someone having to go through the entire process changing column names. We just want at the start it to be set up in a nice holding table, and then it can run through right towards the end. So thanks for listening, and good luck.